first session of our college recruiting webinar series. We are so excited to have you here. In this series, we'll discuss the importance of building your brand early in order to recruit today's high school students and how these strategies can help you survive the demographic downturn. Today, we're going to have a conversation. We've got just 20 minutes. We're not going to show slides or walk through fancy technology, but instead, we wanted to create a space where everyone has the chance to learn from an expert on building your brand with a new generation of students. My name is Michelle Wu, and I'm the Strategic Client Specialist for Higher Education at Tallo. And joining me today is Benjamin Chen, the North American Outreach Associate for Minerva University. Accredited by the Western Association of Schools and Colleges, Senior College and University Commission, Minerva is a nonprofit university focused on improving the future by enhancing student potential to lead the development of innovative solutions to the most complex challenges of our time. I have some questions to get us started today, but as we are going through this discussion, please feel free to add your thoughts and your questions into the Q&A so we can make sure we get those answered too and make this a valuable and impactful conversation to help you with your own strategizing and planning. I want to start by welcoming Ben to the conversation. Raised in suburban Toronto, Canada, Ben has experienced a largely traditional education until he enrolled at Minerva University, a global institution aiming to reimagine higher education. Now, as the outreach representative for Minerva in the US and Canada, Ben is combining his experiences with traditional and innovative educational models to tackle the recruitment challenges presented by the pandemic. What an honor it is to have you here with us today, Ben. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, diving right in and a little context for everyone joining us, I want to start what I think is an incredible example of how Minerva promotes their brand to a new generation of talent. With the challenges brought on the pandemic, obviously colleges had no choice but to turn to virtual recruitment methods to reach students. And as a result, students are more inundated than ever with information from virtual college fairs, webinar series, email campaigns, you name it. So, it's hard sometimes to make yourself stand out. So Ben, I'd love for you to share a little bit about Minerva's approach to virtual programming and how you make yourself attractive to this new generation of talent.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm really excited to talk about this because what's interesting is that our strategy, although is now mostly virtual, like most schools have had to convert to, has been quite similar even before the pandemic. And that's largely due to our operations where we try to, and we do outreach in every region of the world. And as you can imagine, that makes traveling already difficult even before the pandemic. So we already had quite a lot of infrastructure there. But also, I would say if I had to really distill down the strategy that we take in both, that it lends pretty well to virtual programming, in fact, is that we lead by expertise. And the reason we do this is because we don't really have the benefits that a lot of other institutions have, which is a long history. Minerva University was founded in 2012. So that was not very long ago, just 10 years ago. And so we don't have that name recognition. We need to really prove to people that we know what we're talking about. So a lot of the times we lead with expertise and talk about things that we know a lot about, just to not only be in a way to show people that we know what we're doing. And it lends itself really well to virtual programming, is because a lot of virtual programming, as you guys probably have found, and a lot of different, my colleagues in the space have probably found as well, is that it's really hard to get people to come. It's just like really difficult, because the reality is nobody wants to sit into another Zoom call if they don't have to, which is why I really appreciate those who are listening here today. I know what it's like. Our days are full of these kind of things now. So every time I do ask students to hop on a Zoom call, I want to make sure that I'm providing them value, and that they can leave with something, hopefully, that they learned today from me. So we really try to lead with our expertise. And even before the pandemic, even when we were doing in-person visits, we rarely did the traditional info session deck. We would often go to schools and do this workshop that I host, called Design Your Ideal College, which uses a design thinking process to really help students think critically about their education in university and in college and beyond. And critical thinking is a major component of what we teach at Minerva. So it's really trying to draw out what we have already in our program, what we're already good at, and proving right away to our students that we know what we're talking about. So that's really been our strategy in regards to virtual programming as well. It's just been moved to almost entirely online, which is that how do we what do you call it? How do you figure out what students are looking for? What are we good at that we can provide to these students? And then how can we provide it to them virtually? So that's really been the strategy. And I would love to add also, if that's okay, Michelle, just a little bit more on my experience. I would like to think I can speak for 18-year-olds. I think we would all like to, but I can't. But what I can say is that as a 23-year-old who kind of grew up in a very digital world, a lot of the times young people are used to feeling like just another customer, just like another person to be sold to. But young people, a lot of the times, and I'm sure you guys all encountered this too, is that they're really confused about the state of the world, like we all are, but they have all this pressure on them to kind of go off and make the world a better place for everyone, for themselves, for their future. And so for me, also taking that perspective, I'm really focused on how can I show students that I know they're struggling and I know they're having a tough time. So what can I do based on my position to show you that we're here for you and we want to see you grow and succeed? Because I think a lot of the time students see universities and colleges as a sort of like, almost like it's us versus them. Like I need to prove to them that I belong there. But really, as in higher ed, we're really trying to see them succeed. And that's what we want to do. So really, those are some of the guiding principles for me when I'm thinking of what kind of things, what programming should I be creating and reaching out to these students with.
Yeah, well, what I thought was super impressive was earlier in the spring, we were working with you to promote one of your webinars. And what was so unique about it is it had nothing to do with Minerva. It was about preparing individuals for careers post-pandemic. And I remember asking you, I was like, wow, you're going to give this time. Are you going to really talk about Minerva at all? And you said, no. Now, if they want to learn about Minerva afterwards, that's great. And I remember just being a little shocked by that. So I just think that's awesome how you guys provide that expertise and are focused on that career development. I know that's a big thing with your students, but you're already doing that whenever you're reaching out to them for recruitment as well.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. And that's really what it is, right? Because I like what I mean when the reason we don't ever really, like when we do our webinars, we do have info sessions. So like when we do have, we have like a balance of those content expert leading driven workshops and things like what do we know about the future of education and the future of work? Like what are the experts saying? And then hosting a webinar on that where we don't really talk about Minerva. But then of course, at the end of the webinar, we'll say like, I hope you learned something today. And the reason we talked about this is because we are really focused on the future of work. And if you're interested in how you could be prepared for the future of work through us, then we actually have a webinar next week where you can come learn more just about Minerva. So of course, we also have those more traditional just info session things on our website as well. But for us, because we don't have that, again, name recognition, we really have to show people that we know what we're talking about. So, and everyone's kind of interested, especially young people, about what the future of work looks like. What are they going to need to know to succeed? And if we can provide that value to them, that will not only build trust between us and the students we're talking to, but also hopefully they'll feel like we are a trusted source that they can look to for education, for learning. And at the end of the day, that's going to, in the long run, be much more impactful for us than as if we just made a sales pitch to them through an info session.
Yeah, I completely agree. And we have a question from the audience saying, what is your follow-up after these webinars? Do you find that students are interested in Minerva by taking this professional development approach to the webinars?
Yeah, I think it is, I have to be honest, the tough part that I haven't yet to really solve and is still looking for solutions to is the ability to be able to really trace the webinar attendees to applicants to this and this. So it is hard for me to give a more qualitative, definitive answer in regards to how well this is converting. But what I can say is that my follow-ups usually look like right after the webinar, I will send them a follow-up email that is generally really personal. And I write the follow-up email after the webinar, so then I can bring up something that I usually talk about, because again, students are getting so many emails. They want to feel like it's personal to them. So I'll say like, and like this is the thing I mentioned in the webinar. If I like mentioned a video or something, like check it out here. And then I'll usually follow up with a link that is tracked that like takes them to the website or our application. And say, if you want to learn more, check out our YouTube channel. And I'll usually do like a bit.ly link or something, just so at least I can see. That's like kind of the best way I have currently to track them, to see where they head off to next. But I have to be honest, I don't have a definitive answer in regards to how they convert. But what I do have is more qualitative data, which is that a lot of the times the students end up staying longer than they want to, which is a huge compliment to me, because I know nobody wants to be staying past that Zoom call time. So a lot of the times, actually, I'll have this webinar. I'll say like, I can stay on longer if you guys have more questions about Minerva. Like now that we got that out of the way, like if you want to talk about Minerva, I'm here for another 20 minutes. And a lot of the time, students will stay longer just to talk about Minerva. And I think that to me is really interesting, because then they set up this established relationship where I'm here to as a support, as a mentor, and they can come to me for questions, and they feel like they can trust me, which I also just like, we know how hard it is to engage students on a virtual arena. So even just for them to engage with me and talk to me is a big compliment on its own for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to get more into how you all take that personal approach all the way through the admissions process. But first, we do have another question from the audience: is how do you market these webinars to prospective students?
Yeah, and this is probably a bit more traditional in the sense, like we all have our own routes of pushing and like publicizing. So for us, we have emails, we have social media. Tallo has been a huge help. I will say, like, honestly, I've been such a big fan, and Michelle knows this, but we've been working together for over a year now, or almost a year now. And yeah, Tallo has just been really great for us because if we have a more business, like work focused webinar, right? Like the future of work, we can then think like, okay, what kind of students are really interested in the future of work? Now, luckily that one is actually pretty widespread, but we'll find students who are like, probably thinking about their professional lives already, which is like, for example, on Tallo has like, there's a lot of FBLA members. I was an FBLA member. I know this, that at the time I was only an FBLA because I was trying to understand what the world of work already looked like. And that was kind of a simulation of it. So then we would go on Tallo and filter for FBLA students and just send it to them directly. It's like, okay, we think this is going to be interesting for you. And that's a big one. Like when I publicize my webinars, I usually try to say in a way, it's like, why do I think this is going to be useful for you? I studied marketing, and in marketing, we always say like, sell the benefits, not the features, which is like, what is this going to do for you? And so a lot of times when I email students or go on social media, or when I'm talking to counselors or students about an upcoming webinar I'm showing, I'll say like, we all know how confusing it is right now to feel like we fit into the world. It feels like the job market is so intimidating. It feels like we never really know how to prepare for that world. But if you're curious on what the experts are saying and what we can provide, like come check this out. And that way they know exactly what they're going to be getting when they come.
Well, now since we only have like 6 minutes left, and I definitely want to get into this last bit. I know I don't have much time, but as part of your personalized recruitment, part of it is your process of bias-free admissions, which is very interesting to me. Could you go in a little bit about that, your admissions process, and how it's unique from traditional university?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. And I know we only have a few minutes, so I'll try to keep it brief, but this is one of my absolute most favorite parts of Minerva. It's something I didn't even realize I was passionate about university admissions until I learned about Minerva's. But as somebody who still remembers what it was like to be facing the university admissions process as a high schooler, I just remember how intimidating it was and how scary it was and how arbitrary it felt, yet how important and monumental this was going to be for my entire life. And so when I started talking to my Minerva's admissions officers, the one who designed the whole thing, like what, and we say this all the time, like, okay, bias-free admissions, but what does that mean? Like, what is bias? And I think what I learned is that the bias in a university admissions exists not because of any individual person. Every school nowadays, and they're trying really hard to really try to undo a lot of the biases that are within the system. But the reality is a lot of the systems of admissions was built in the Industrial Revolution, when the world looked really, really different. And we can see how quickly the world has changed, but we still have the same system largely that we did back then. Now, the benefits and sort of advantage that we have that a lot of schools don't is that we are a new school. We're building from the ground up. So we get to reimagine what we think the admission system can look like. And so what we've had, even long before the pandemic, starting in 2012, we've never looked at standardized test scores. We've been need blind. And also we know that assumes so much more than a GPA or college essay. So we don't look at stuff like athletic status, legacy status, and also what else? Nationality. We also don't look at nationality. So we actually are able to completely take out all of those things and just look at a student and see how they think, who they are, and what they've done. We actually have this really interesting part of the admissions process where it's completely unique. You have to be on our website to do it, but it's like these challenges that test how critically you think, how effectively you can communicate, how creative you can think. And I can tell you, like, I can't tell you very much because obviously it's like the admissions team would be very unhappy with me. But what I can say is that when I did the Minerva application, it was the only application where I felt like it was fun because I was like, oh, they're actually trying to get to know me. And that's something I will say, again, it's related to like students don't really feel that cared for by universities in general. Like when I was doing an application as a high school senior, most of the time, I feel like I was trying to really prove myself to universities. Like I'm at sort of their disposal. I need to be proving myself to them to show them that I'm good enough for them. But as college admissions people and people working in recruiting, we know that's not the case. Like we're actually trying to support them, and we're not determining whether they're smart enough or good enough. We're trying to find the right fit for our school. But a lot of the times it doesn't really convey, and students don't necessarily feel that way. But with the Minerva admissions process, because of how detailed it is and the way that it's designed, has, in my experience, really made me as a high school senior feel cared for and understood and seen. And that's exactly what the admissions team has designed it to be, is so that they can understand a student holistically, see how they think, and really try to gauge their potential and their curiosity, and then thus their fit in Minerva. Now, there's a whole thing, and I recommend if you are passionate and curious about that, I would recommend checking it out on our website, because I'm no expert in this. I'm just an outreach associate. Our admissions team is truly the expert on this topic, but it is something I'm very passionate about. So thank you for bringing that up.
Absolutely. And we had a question come in. Have you seen that this leads to retention because these students are feeling seen and valued?
Yes, totally. Our retention tends to be in the high 80s to 90s. And that is a really big part of it, is because now, again, Minerva is quite different than a lot of schools. Like our community is really quite small. Like I graduated with 130 other students. It is just, we have a pretty small cohort where we have the ability to really make every single individual student feel like an individual and cared for. And that's a big part of our program. But yeah, I do think that's a big part of it. And our yield rate tends to be quite high, I think, for that reason as well. We tend to sit within the high 60s% in regards to our yield rate. And I think that it's all part of it, right? Is that a student needs to feel like they're cared for. And because when a student is deciding what college to go to, they want to feel like they can see themselves feeling at home there. And a big part of feeling at home is feeling comfortable and feeling understood. And I do think that's a big part of it.
Couldn't agree more. And it looks like we are right at that 20-minute mark here. This went by super quick, Ben. So thank you so much, Ben, for sharing all of that wonderful insight and information today. And thank you for everyone who joined us and asked questions to join in the conversation. We're going to put up some contact information on the screen if you have any other questions, and we'll make sure if you have any questions specific to Ben, that we will get those to him. But thank you all for joining, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you so much.